And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to GeekWatch, a subsidiary of the monastery, the open bar of the internet. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 good brothers. Ha 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 ha. We have our resident cosplayer and man coming in with the folding chair, good brother Slick Rick.
Monk, you really gotta get those laughs looked at. It is not good for your health.
Channeling gorillas, shut up.
Besides that, I also have to remind people, intrusive gimmicks are terrible. If you understand, good. If you don't, I don't know whether to pity you or feel like you dodged a bullet.
We have our residents madman behind the look of this monk, and the man who put us through the longest episode of Valley of the Judge ever, good brother Jeremy.
Yes, sir. That game turns 35 this year, Planet Bound, so big things to come.
Yep. We have making his debut on GeekWatch, but certainly not new to the monastery. The man who probably hates Bayformers more than the rest of us combined. Good brother Alistair.
Yeah, that was an abridged version. Abridged version of that video.
Yeah. Oh. And our resident Wikipedia and flamboyant flyer, good brother Flutter.
Hello.
Time will tell if we end up getting any more or who's going to meet the Doku challenge. It may even end up being... My money's on either Doku or Koops.
We'll see on Coops. He might be doing a bunch of Sonic-related stuff, knowing him.
Probably. I can always just throw out some waifus as bait.
Well, here's the thing. Right now he's marking out over a MomoCon guest announcement for yesterday.
Yeah, I saw.
Yeah, I heard him.
But this time around, one particular matter that I have not tackled in this particular series has been the matter of Transformers. And for the longest time, it was because either A, I didn't want to step on the toes of some of our colleagues, and B, I needed the right angle. But then I ended up, for whatever reason, on a whim, I ended up thinking about what is referred to as the Unicron Trilogy. That three-season setup that was a Japanese and American co-production consisting of Armada, Energon, and Cybertron. It was supposed to be a grand return of the G1 series of Transformers. After all, it'd been, say what, 30 years since that particular era had been tackled?
Yeah.
20, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
86 to, well, a little before 86.
Somewhere around there, but the main thing was after the mixed success of the Beast era, let's face it, Beast Wars financially was a success. However, things to Beast Machines, it tanked badly, so they had to go back to form.
Yeah.
And I'm well aware that
at least 86 was, they're referring to Unicron, so the first appearance of Unicron, of course, is in the Transformers movie, in which was 86. So them returning to the Unicron story period is 86 to 22.
Yeah.
2022.
Yeah.
Though of the three, despite being a rush job, the one that ends up feeling the most anime of the three is Armada, and
Oh, you aren't wrong.
both especially in terms of things like camera work and some of the way certain shots were done. I'm well aware that there was a lot of shortcuts being done because Hasbro rushed the thing, because Hasbro getting in their own way. Shocker.
Yeah.
Hey. Yeah, that's a free space on everyone's bingo card. Please mark that down. Yes, we're doing that this episode.
Yes, we're doing that this episode.
Look, one of these days I will end up having to play a buy or sell regarding who has the bigger history of screwing up between Hasbro and Fox. Although in my personal opinion, Fox wins that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, I have to agree. After all, Hasbro's still around.
Yeah.
Their franchises weren't bought out.
Well, we'll see how long that lasts.
So I have an interesting take on that transition to Armada. I really think that Dreamwave played a bigger role than people give them credit for, because they had already done Generation 1, the first series of Generation 1 as comics, and those were so good. Like, I remember my mind being blown away. The art was incredible. It was this really interesting revival of Transformers, and Hasbro picked up on it and were like, hey, we can do this series. We'll collaborate with Japan and have Dreamwave do the comic of it, and it'll be a big money-making machine. And do a bunch of toys.
Yeah.
Which I can see. I didn't come across the Dreamwave comics until after Armada was out. And if I'm being quite honest, the best work that Transformers has done, period, has been in the comics in their various incarnations.
Yeah.
Whether it be the original Marvel comics, which actually predate the cartoon, kind of.
By 4 months.
A little bit, yeah.
Well, it was the big reason, and maybe one of you can clarify this for me. The big reason that the comics were made was as a way to essentially get past the rules, basically advertising the toys by not advertising the toys, because they had pulled this exact stunt with G.I. Joe a few years beforehand.
Yep.
I never knew that.
Now, granted, there were issues doing it because wherever Marvel goes, drama follows.
Yeah.
Remember, they did the original Star Wars comics too.
Yeah, and published the Star Wars manga.
Yep.
But I know whenever I say that, people are like, "Oh, you mean like Phase 4 drama?" No. The drama problem has been a thing since their inception. There's always been some kind of bullshit. And if you want the ultimate expression, just look at the bankruptcy case and how they managed to do violate the one rule of the court: don't piss off the judge.
Don't piss off the judge? How the fuck are they still around?
Mostly because you had like 5 different factions absolutely hating each other in those court proceedings. Because Carl Icahn was feuding with Ron Perelman, Toy Biz, the bank syndicate that was handling the debt, the judge, and the trustee that the judge appointed were all fighting each other at one point or another.
Wow.
Okay, why haven't we gotten an animation of this on a Jerry Springer set?
Because they'd think it was too unrealistic.
Half the stuff we see on Jerry Springer says otherwise.
That's the joke. But as far as why I picked this particular trilogy is because, for starters, it wasn't called the Unicron trilogy from my recollection until years later. And it was called that by fans because all 3 series involved Unicron in some form.
Yeah.
But
it was during Cybertron that people started calling it that.
Mm-hmm. And I'm well aware of the Robots in Disguise anime that predated Armada, but I don't think most people knew about that until much later. Because
I remember seeing a couple episodes before Armada. So.
Yeah. But
that was a weird one where like everyone owned the toys for that one, but nobody can ever recall actually seeing the show when it broadcast.
Yeah.
Because the episode I remember of that, I think it was Tanker or whoever the evil. It was an evil tanker robot. Him and Megatron were using Proform capsules and were getting more troops. I distinctly remember that episode because UFO Megatron has 4 capsules attached to him.
Yeah. But I've gone back and looked, but the big thing that came out of this trilogy was, as I mentioned, co-production between anime studios and Hasbro. Though there were some weird things that resulted out of this, like obviously there's been the issue of different names in Japanese and in English, but also in some cases whole different stories because of the way things were dubbed.
Correct.
Looks over at Superlink.
And then there's the elephant in the room, which was
trying to fix problems with the story in the dubs.
Yeah. Then there was the elephant in the room of Energon and Cybertron using very, very stiff and blatant CGI.
Awful CGI.
If anyone wants to know the reason why I keep banging on about obvious CGI in animation, you can blame Energon and Cybertron for pushing that along.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's really rough.
I mean, they're not the biggest offenders when it comes to this. Looking straight at you, Gonzo. You know what you did.
Well, Gonzo was a part of Cybertron, weren't they?
No, I think all three were being handled by Toei. And we lost Flutter.
Look that up because I think Gonzo got involved by the time Cybertron was around.
Actually, Jeremy's right.
Okay.
Gonzo was the animation studio that helped with Cybertron.
It still was off. I mean, it didn't change. It's like they copied, pasted from the previous ones, so they didn't really try to improve. That's not accurate. I think there's maybe marginal improvement, but it still is just not good CGI.
Yeah. And
also, YGM, not a high bar.
Yeah.
But it was better, but still not by much. There's still the issue of having 2D characters and 3D animation mix has always felt off.
Like it's gotten better over time, but in this case, the shows we're talking about, where it was still, for all intents and purposes, still in infancy or in preschool age. Yeah, no.
And
or unless you're really going to, go way back, things like Great Mouse Detective or what's the giant robot? Why can't I think of the name of the movie? Where you're actually hand animating over the CGI, so it feels like hand drawn animation.
Yeah, but then you hit the problem of budget constraints.
Oh gosh, it becomes awful.
Yeah, nobody's gonna do that for like a TV show that's supposed to last several episodes.
Especially not for one that's designed to sell toys.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Now I do have to correct myself with these three entries, as well as Robots in Disguise, which you could kind of look at as the prototype. They were produced in Japan and then adapted into English.
Correct.
But
I think wasn't Armada came out here before it, even though it was made there. Once it was dubbed, it was released here first, right?
Yeah.
It's possible, and obviously, obviously the animation studio was different from Armada to the other two, which is probably why of the three, I think Armada is the one that people are the most nostalgic for.
Sure. It felt like, I mean, the janky animation, the janky hand animation, like the character inconsistencies, all kinds of stuff that was going on in Armada felt a lot like all the inconsistencies and jankiness of the 1980s cartoon, because there was a lot of that back then too. So it was nostalgic about the nostalgia of it. So we were kind of like, oh, this feels like the 80s.
Yeah. Now, the other thing that helped is the studio involved was Actus, who nowadays is part of the Bandai umbrella. But Actus had already had a few series under their belt, and of course there were a bunch of side material. But I'm not concerned with the side material. Although the PS2 game was all right for the time, though anytime somebody asks me to recommend a Transformers video game, there's one obvious answer I'm going to give them. That's the Cybertron duology.
Yeah.
And
I thought it was Tatakai.
oh, fuck off.
I'm sorry, I can't help it, especially after that glitch a certain associate of ours had. A glitch on Bumblebee that says, Bumblebee, the tiny warrior. And the pan up shot did not work.
Yeah. Regardless, when it comes... the other big problem was Armada was its own season, and a pretty self-contained one. Energon felt like it was making an attempt at a follow-up to it, but wasn't fully willing to commit. And Cybertron was a completely different story entirely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was where the dubs, I mean, like the Japanese version to the dub tried to fix that. Like they tried to make way more connection to the other two, thus making the quote Unicron trilogy that it started to be referred to, when really originally it didn't have much, if at all, to do with the other two.
Yeah. And of course the big legacy is introducing the whole Minicons thing and reintroducing Primus.
Oh yeah.
Because if you're going to have the devil, you may as well have the god of the Transformers universe.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But
well, then the Minicons being, I mean, of course, that was most emphasized in Armada. There's stuff. There was other things that they, in all of them, designed to. Okay, in this one, all the Autobots can come to me. I think in the middle one, right? In Energon, like the Autobots could all come together to form
Power links.
bigger things. And so again, the whatever the toy gimmick was became the premise for the show.
Yeah, and then Cybertron had the Planet Keys.
Yes, the Planet Keys. I couldn't remember what they were called.
Planet Keys.
Yeah, I've watched too much TJ Omega crap.
But that being said, I still feel like with what was supposed to be a trilogy and what was supposed to be really not only bringing the G1 cast back into the limelight, but also trying to reintroduce the mythos aspect of Transformers, which has always been the aspect I've found the most fascinating compared to other properties. I felt there was a lot of missed opportunities.
Yes.
And exploring missed opportunities is part and parcel of the constructions and reconstructions. So, with all those missed opportunities and with the whole idea of doing a trilogy in this sense, as we often say, let us have a go. So, I think one of the big the original setup with Armada, there's not a whole lot that's necessary to change it. Maybe mess around with the pacing so that one episode is not just set up and all of that. But the elephant in the room is the nature of mini cons. You know, these small transformers that can link up with main ones and somehow give them new weapons and abilities.
And we're somehow in Earth, like underneath Earth, like the whole time.
Mm-hmm. And I think
go ahead.
I think one of the big questions that needs to be answered is one how they got there, and two what exactly they are, because there's implication that they were made by Primus, though since Primus is the god of the Transformers, that doesn't mean a whole lot, as well as them being workers that helped build Cybertron, but that's it in terms of the origins of them. And I do think that's something that needs to be given a bit of detail if they are going to be the main focus.
I thought, I remember hearing once, and I'm currently looking up to find credit to this source to credit this. I remember hearing once that the minicons could also be interpreted as the cells were a part of Unicron himself. So I'm currently.
Which would be okay. So I think there's the big, if you're gonna tell the Transformer story. So the best example of a complete Transformer story was not Generation 1. It was the movie. The movie was a really great complete Transformer story, and Unicron was a massive part of that story. Yeah. So the cosmology aspect of it, I think, would have to be addressed first, meaning Primus and Unicron. Whether or not we have to go into where they came from, that part, I don't know, is relevant. And the 13 primes, and that the 13 primes have to have roles. They just can't be like, okay, yeah, there were 13 primes, and so maybe amongst the 13 primes is where you see so many aspects, like the keys later on, and the mini cons, and because of the roles that each of the primes had, would have given them the impetus to create something that they hid on Earth, for example, in the mini cons, or on Cybertron, or otherwise. I don't think that necessarily has to come from these two god beings, but can come from the things that they created. But I think the cosmology is super important, or else it's like, why and what's going on here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And when it comes to the whole any association with Unicron, again, there's a lot of stretches that could have been added in at the last minute, as far as we're aware. And the idea of having everything in some form connected to either Primus or Unicron, as I hinted at when we tackled The Legend of Korra, I do not like that. And a big reason why I don't like that is what I call the Moriarty problem, where tying every one of Sherlock Holmes's cases to Professor Moriarty ends up shrinking the world instead of expanding it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's why I mentioned the primes. I think that they're really the way you get to explore so many aspects of it, and really then Unicron and Primus just become a backdrop. They're not really the crux of anything.
So, which is fair, because maybe it's just me, but I feel like there were two things that the primes were supposed to be emulating. One of them is the mythos of the Knights of the Round Table.
Correct.
Oh yeah.
The other being essentially the if Primus is supposed to be the god of the Transformers, then the primes are his angels.
Correct.
Especially since given the things that they end up being the progenitors for, they're kind of a pantheon in of themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
So it sounds like the direction you're leaning into is that the minicons were a creation or a byproduct of the primes instead of either Unicron or Primus.
Yeah, and probably particularly one of them that had a stake in Earth and or a stake in the reason that minicons were valuable to the other quote unquote children of the Prime, meaning the Autobots and the Decepticons. That there was a reason behind making sure that they were there and available if needed on Earth, and that's the part that's the misnomer. Why Earth? But that's the big question of Transformers. Why Earth? For so many reasons.
Now with the original with the original continuity, the reason why Earth was focused around Energon. Both sides having to deal with essentially a fuel shortage.
Yeah. Pretty much, yeah.
So, as far as which Prime was responsible, given the fact that the 13 wouldn't be a thing until 2013, with Prime.
Yep.
Honestly, I think it has to be Vector Prime. He showed up in Cybertron. That's one that can be used in this time frame.
Sure.
And Vector Prime already looked like a ancient machine as it was. Plus the whole Ask Vector Prime thing for years. In other words,
I think one.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say one thing you could have is it's kind of what they did in the Aligned continuity or Prime continuity. I know Aligned is kind of loaded, but in the Prime continuity, they had, I think it was in season 2, where they had those artifacts from the Primes that they hid on Earth. It's kind of like it's kind of like a similar setup like that, but you would need to have an antagonistic force outside of the Primes to force them to go to Earth, unless you want to redo the whole Unicron as Earth thing, and I don't think we want to do that. But
no.
Like maybe like the Quintessons, they were like in Transformers 1, they're at war with the Quintessons, so they hid the minicons on Earth as a last resort, because Cybertron is under siege, so they don't want to find the minicons on Cybertron.
Correct.
That can.
And then of course, like when the war started, it was like well before humanity was even like in the gene pool, so Earth would be completely abandoned. And thus, it would also explain why nobody found them until the Cybertronians came to Earth.
Yeah, and I would say in regard to that, there's with a lot of the early setup that can more or less stay. There's one particular element that I'd want to address, because like in the first episode, the Autobots are made aware that the Decepticons are using short-range warping to get in and out of places, and surmise, they're on the moon. Then we spend half the season, not going to the moon when it comes to trying to find the location of that base, because it's not like there's a bunch of other stuff on the moon or anything. So it wouldn't be difficult to. So if you know they're on the moon, all you'd have to do is just do a Energon scan, and you'd be able to find them. So I think as a way to get around that, you could probably have that around the moon there's a lot of jamming, or just the space junk in the atmosphere is preventing proper scans. Just something small like that to show there's a reason why we're not just jumping straight to the moon.
Right.
Well, I guess too, when it comes to a trilogy, and you're so having the cosmology, meaning the whys behind what's going on, these two evil and good forces, that's always a great thing. Then you have these primes that have had roles over the years, including seeding the minicons, and eventually the keys and lots of other aspects of what could go into the trilogy. Then where is the ground-based story? Like, who is the protagonist of this trilogy? Who has the hero's journey in this? And it can't be the Autobots as a whole. I guess it could, but who then? Do we choose Optimus, which is of course easy? Is it Rodimus? There's somebody for us, the audience, to follow in this, or else it's kind of like, okay, we're just telling a cool Transformers story.
Like,
I think when it comes to that, the three kids of
Carlos, Rad, and I forgot her name.
And Carlos, Rad, and Alexis.
Yeah.
Those three can be who you build around. And as far as a Transformer to build around, even though I understand why our good friend TJ hates him, but a reconstructed Hotshot would need to be it, because
But he only hates the toys because all the problems with the gimmick.
Yeah.
Well, that's Hasbro.
But
Yeah.
I would
So yeah, I mean, and of course the humans as protagonists is great because I'm a human and I can relate to it as an audience member. That makes it awesome. And then Hotshot is very human-ish of the Transformers, so he is a great bridge. So that works.
I would
Also the
oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say also the humans play a very important utility in the story, is that we need humans there so that we can have a natural way to explain the lore of this universe, because they're not gonna know some ancient shit from like a million years ago. So the humans need to be there so that we can actually explain this to them in a natural way. So it's not like, okay, so why are you telling Optimus this? He already knows this, you know?
YGM brings up the question of how we would reconstruct Hotshot's character. The idea with him is that he's supposed to be a hothead. A hothead is usually somebody who is their own worst enemy, gets in their own way.
It's as his name. I was going to say it's in his name. He's a hotshot. It's as he's described, and it's supposed to be, to an extent. I'm going to use Beast Wars for a second on this one. If you look at the beginning of the Beast Wars continuity, especially during the first season, if you look at Cheetor, who is the youthful Transformer of the cast, similar to how Hotshot is. They're supposed to be young, naive, energetic. Basically, they want to call their own shots. Though there's a bit more arrogance or hot-headedness to Hotshot, but I digress. That's the archetype they're supposed to do, and their main character, the main story for them is them maturing over the course of the war.
Yeah.
And it's perfect for the relatability to the audience because they are immature. So therefore, they're not Optimus or others who already know what's going on. Oftentimes, their immaturity means they don't know what's going on. So even though they are something otherworldly to us, we have a relatability. Rodimus did that for us in the movie, in the Transformers movie. Hot Rod, again, that type of over-the-top rebel, annoying a little bit character, but that the audience can relate to, because it's like, okay, I can't relate to Optimus Prime. He's this alien giant robot, but I can relate to this guy because he's fun, just like a human. He acts a little bit more like a human, but he's one of them, and gives me my connection.
Mm-hmm. I would say, to answer the question of how to reconstructing Hotshot, because it very much feels like it was trying to be equal parts Hot Rod vis-a-vis the movie and Bumblebee.
Yeah.
Especially in like design. If you didn't know any better, you would assume it would be easy to assume Hotshot is some new art style change version of Bumblebee.
Yeah.
But
wasn't that around the time where Hasbro couldn't use Bumblebee?
For trademark reasons, I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was something that went on there for a while.
But the approach that I'm thinking is, when it comes to instead of the more bumbling approach you have with Hotshot, I would have him that when push comes to shove, he is actually really, really good at what he does. The problem is he has a habit of getting high on his own supply and overstepping it.
Yeah.
Because there's a very clear pair of opposites you can have between him and someone like Red Alert.
Yeah.
Most definitely, yeah.
Red Alert always felt like the backup leader, kind of in the position that Ultra Magnus has been in the last few years.
Yeah.
Of
He
the
certainly was
leader.
that role in the first generation 80s cartoons, for sure.
Mm-hmm. And you have an easy, very relatable conflict with someone who has definitely seen a thing or two and has more experience versus someone who is way too overconfident. That's a pair that will always have a place.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Not to mention, it's like his role is also necessary in this case, because, correct me if I'm wrong, but like, how many times have we had a Autobot team, or I'm just going to use an equivalent of the Autobots, and not have had at some least someone designated as the medic?
Yeah.
It's like, you're in a war, you're going to need the medic, and since, like, with the human cast, having someone like Red Alert who is knowledgeable, not as much as Optimus, but is just as knowledgeable, is another person they could go to get more exposition, or at least an understanding of what's going on.
Yeah. There is one thing that was in Armada that I definitely want to keep, and that is the portrayal of Starscream.
Yeah.
I thought as much. Absolutely.
I have one more thing on top of that I want to keep, but mend a bit. But that could be later.
Now, I will admit a bit of bias because obviously I know everybody enjoys the blatant backstabber that Starscream usually is, but it was a bold move to go the route that they did with Armada, where his whole arc is just being completely fed up with how much of a asshole Megatron is to people. In fact, that's the reason why he keeps turning on him, is because he was sick of his shit.
That's always been like the core character among many things, is he hates Megatron, and that's on top of his cowardliness, his scheming. The main reason why everyone agrees that Starscream in Armada is so good is because they've taken away all of that, and they kept the one thing, which was his hatred of Megatron, and they just built on that to do stuff that normally Starscream would never do. Like, for example, team up with the Autobots, care about the humans.
And now I will note that we talk about a trilogy, and I think that's something to highlight, because with each of them you can kind of go with 3 acts and 3 levels of scale. Armada, I would say should be exclusively kept on Earth. Energon, we start to go into the space stuff, and by the time Cybertron comes along, we're fully in the more space end of things.
To that end, because I think that Hotshot is such is the one who has the hero's journey, probably even more than the humans. Meaning, he has the transformation from this immature, fly by the seat of your pants guy to something much more mature, very similar to what Rodimus did, becoming Hot Rod from Hot Rod to Rodimus Prime in the original movie. Doesn't need to be that. He doesn't need to become a Prime or anything like that. But there is some sort of what's the transformation? What's the end result of Hotshot? Who does he become to the Autobots and the humans? That is the resolution of
well,
everything.
Here's an idea then. It was through the influence of Unicron that Megatron becomes Galvatron. Yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
Why not have Primus do something similar?
Okay. Which is essentially what happened. There was no Primus back then, but that's essentially what happens to Hot Rod becoming Rodimus. He just gets the Matrix of Power, which is essentially what would have been like the God, key to. If I
make any parallels when it comes to the whole mythos thing, the Matrix of Leadership would be akin to the Holy Grail.
Right.
Yeah.
And I know I'm making a lot of Arthurian remarks with this, but it's, well, if the shoe fits. But because of the fact that a lot of it is kept on Earth, the one particular aspect I would keep is that attempt to do the sacred regalia that they did with the minicons. 3 creating the Star Saber, 3 creating the Skyboon Shield, and 3 creating the Hydra Cannon.
Oh yeah, the Requiem Blaster. Yeah.
Yeah, the Requiem Blaster. The Hydra Cannon was combining all 3. And I think that's something that can be kept. But in terms of
for sure,
in terms of who the overarching villain representative would be, instead of the twist being that Unicron is the true villain, for Armada, which would intended to be the first act, there is one particular character that would fit the villain role perfectly, and for the longest time he was the biggest asshole in the whole cast.
Sideways.
Yep, Sideways.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
That character
that
is such a gem. I am shocked, yet also a part of me is thankful they haven't tried bringing that variation of Sideways back in modern days in some way, because it's tough to do one better.
It really is, yeah.
The big reason I want to go with Sideways is because, as far as a upfront villain, he was the one who fits that role the most, since as a lot of the backstabby stuff that was in Starscream for the longest time ended up getting transferred over to him, but not necessarily the cowardice, at least not until the last minute.
Oh yeah.
And definitely not the horrible screechy voice.
No. But the big reason Sideways is a natural fit is because of the fact that for the longest time it's never quite clear whose side he's actually on. He will play either side for his own agenda. And in that particular playing both sides, there's the notion of him playing on the insecurities of anyone he's working with. Because they try and go with this idea that he is a spy, Unicron's spy originally, but instead of Unicron, I can think of one person who he'd probably be working for instead.
Who?
The Fallen.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I would honestly go with him working for him, because having him work for Unicron, there doesn't seem to be a strong enough connection, because Unicron doesn't seem to be the kind of character who would care about that kind of subterfuge.
He really doesn't, no.
I mean, when your diet consists of planets, why would you care about subterfuge or trying to destabilize a planet when you're just gonna eat it anyways?
Right.
Now, the Fallen, who you can argue whether Shockwave or the Fallen could be considered the devil of the Transformers universe. Personally,
Well, what they could do, because you made the comparisons from the Primes to Angels, and that's a great comparison. Also to the Knights, the Fallen, you could divide it up, and it could go from one character to several, meaning the equivalency of the Primes from Unicron.
I'd be very careful about that because Galvatron's Revenge, that fan film, they did the same thing.
I haven't seen that.
Was it not good?
It was very much not good.
It was terrible.
Then that's out.
But
then he can stay his own thing.
I would have it that going with one of the main things that's often used whenever you have the devil analogy is somebody whose presence is there even if they're not actually there. You know, you fear the thing you can't see.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I would go with the idea that there have been multiple Transformers that he's appeared as. The recurring thing that lets you know that it is the Fallen is all of them are always on fire.
Yep.
Because I know that the Fallen is on fire was something that was taken from the IDW comic, but there's no reason we can't retroactively bring that in here.
Right.
No, there isn't. No.
And I think you could also do something kind of cool with that. Take a page, like I'll get into this a little bit later, but you could take a page out of Mass Effect where like the Fallen could be someone that can indoctrinate people to follow him, and you could have some moments that like will be like dramatic reveals that like you'll find out like maybe one of the Autobots or Decepticons have been indoctrinated by the Fallen, and like the reveal would be that they just start catching on fire, and you just have this oh shit moment, like oh my god, he's been taken over. There's no saving him.
Pretty much.
And if that's a nice fit in with the Scourge archetype too, you know, coming from Unicron, and then the people that are affected by Scourge have, you know, are basically diseased when you finally see them for what they are.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that works.
And one of the bigger, and YGM said you dodged the bullet, Monk. Maybe if I'm drunk enough, I'll look up Galvatron's Revenge just to see how bad it is.
Don't, please don't.
Yeah.
All right, I will duly note that.
No. We're gonna watch it, but we're gonna be blind ass drunk before we do.
I think that's really the only way to get through it. It's pretty bad.
And I'm not wasting good beer on that.
No, we're gonna steal from Duke, and we're gonna use his shit side.
You'll need something stronger than beer for that.
What, absinthe?
You might need rubbing alcohol.
You could always drink cold vodka.
True.
And that might do it.
Or just go on one of those SU planes that was known as the Soviet booze cruise. But the point is with that is that it further goes into that theme of not knowing who can fully be trusted. And when it comes to the whole possession thing, I would have that be something that screws over both sides in some form.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because the whole Autobot Decepticon thing, the Fallen doesn't give a shit about that.
He never has. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of like, as much as I hate that movie, it kind of plays into that line that Lockdown had in Age of Extinction, where he says the Autobots and Decepticons have been making a mess of the galaxy and in this instance, the Fallen would be sick of it.
Hmm.
Yeah. And though I wouldn't do the same route that Lockdown did, because, well,
Oh God, no, absolutely not, no.
but a third faction calling that kind of thing out is certainly worth exploring. I know the minicons are listed as a third faction, but honestly, there's not enough of them to be considered a faction. When the whole of the minicons can be on a damn ship, then it doesn't really feel that way. I would say one of the other reasons why collecting them would be a key component, not only to boost the power of individual transformers, but also I have this idea in my head that within each of them is a cipher. And within that cipher is where some of the deeper secrets of both the minicons and the transformers are. Whether it be in obviously the regalia that we mentioned before, that's one angle that can be taken.
Mhm.
I would say another one of these secrets might be something like where the Fallen's real body is, or something involving, say, if you really wanted to bring Primus into the situation, a activation code for him. You know, the point
Yeah,
is
that's
that because of the fact that these minicrons were made by the Primes, that there's a lot of secrets that are held within them that even they don't know.
Yeah, I was gonna
Yeah.
say them holding the secret to reviving Primus would probably be the best bet, because it's something both the Autobots and the Decepticons want. They want to revive Cybertron so that they can, have control over it.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Well, that plays into I mean, you called them a faction, and well, how can they, because there's so few? Well, maybe there's not. I mean, if the Primes, because we talked about other things that the Primes could do, but if all the Primes in the various aspects, including like the Beast, and whatever Prime is responsible for, whatever, there's minicon versions of those things, and they're spread throughout whatever the known universe cosmos is, and each of them have all of these, ciphers that together bring up, so they could be a complete faction of their own.
Mm-hmm.
And we're dealing with the ones on Earth initially because we're dealing with Armada, but it could be much more expansive than that, and then them as a whole have the key or the information that would be able to revive Primus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Then they could be a faction, not just like, okay, there's too few of these things that can't be their own faction.
Yeah, and I would also say that when it comes to the end of that first act, that is when you potentially have sideways turning on both sides, and I wouldn't have it that both sides are united by the time we get to our second act, which would be the equivalent of Energon, but more that
Right.
there's it shifts between sideways being the primary antagonistic force to the Fallen.
Yeah.
With the big urgency being trying to find the Fallen's original body.
Yep.
I.e., it's known that it's somewhere within the solar system, because he's not able to project himself that across whole star systems like that. So you've got a lot of space to look, but it's a matter of figuring out where it's hidden.
That it is.
And this also because doing that whole escalation thing, this second act is also where you can start having things like some degree of casual space travel that was attempted with Energon. But do you remember how in the actual Energon Kicker had that whole thing of being able to sense energy because of a connection with Primus?
Yeah.
I would be inclined to give that to Rad.
Yeah, I can see why you'd be inclined to do so.
And just not use Kicker at all because it wouldn't be necessary if we're using the same set of characters throughout 3 parts.
Yeah, really wouldn't.
But in his case, it's more of being able to not just sense Energon, but also a lot of things, basically making him a quasi-psychic.
Yep.
And that allows them to have a position in the story, because through that he'd be the one person who would be able to potentially sense where the Fallen's real body is hidden.
Mm-hmm.
But because of the whole gradual build-up, which would eventually lead to Unicron reawakening, there's one aspect that I've felt there was rife exploration for that hasn't been touched by any Transformers series, and that is the idea of Unicron still affecting people while it's inactive, almost in the way that a Eldritch God can affect people while it's still dreaming. Not in the sense of sand check or anything, but still,
of course,
still being able to influence people.
Yeah, well, certainly the Fallen being sick of what's going on between the Autobots and Decepticons, and is just real tired of all of it, and so he's being the main antagonist to stop this cycle of ridiculousness. Could still have been behind it all, being fed by this dormant Unicron.
Mm-hmm. Especially in terms of I could see Unicron teaching the Fallen the technique to do it. The price of their agreement would be his name.
Yeah.
And even if his name you could even have it that certain people who were around to see his original bodies, when they're trying to remember his name, it's like, wait, was that one? No, was it that one? And if this sounds like How Do You Get to Shell Beach from Dark City, which is a really damn good movie, I recommend anyone see. That's kind of what I'm going with.
Like, I know what you're referring to in terms of, it's like, it's happened multiple times. It's literally, once the deal is made, even if you are watching, it has so much power that it affects everyone's cognition.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
well,
you can see the face, but you cannot put the name to it.
Well, I do have one question about that. Would be, because the Fallen's original name would be Megatronus, would that strip that name out of everyone's consciousness, like, completely, or they would just not be able to recognize him?
Oh, they might recognize the face, but not the name. They wouldn't be able to put 2 and 2 together on that.
But would they have memory of the name Megatronus?
As far
I would say so, because that's a way for it to be revealed. Whatever happens that unlocks everyone's consciousness to go, oh my gosh, we remember the incident and we now know who this is.
Yeah.
Okay, because I was about to say, because if it just erases Megatronus from everyone's consciousness, that would kind of be a bit of a plot hole. Because Megatron is named after Megatronus, so
right.
But if it's a name that they remember, they just can't put the name to the face.
They just can't access it.
Yeah, then that would work.
Even if a non-recognized, they don't even have to recognize. It's just that they have no. It's not in their active conscious, meaning all their cybertronic parts. It's been
Oh, so it's like locked away knowledge.
It's locked
they have
away
it, they just can't access it.
Right. They just can't
Okay.
access it.
Mhm. And
Until whatever. So there's the key in the mini cons that is part of that, where they go, whatever happens to unlock that, and everybody has the realization, whatever flashback to see what had actually happened, and then now they're all conscious that that's who this is and that's his name.
Because I was gonna provide an alternative where Megatronus basically lives a lie, whereas the Fallen, where Megatronus it's like the lore would state that Megatronus went off to fight the Dark God Unicron, and he died a hero, and that's why Megatron picks up his name. But then it's revealed that Megatronus didn't defeat Unicron; he struck a deal with him. And then
that's great.
Then he would be revealed to be the Fallen.
Yeah, that's great.
It's
Which makes sense.
I'm suddenly reminded of Sentinel Prime in 1.
That was by complete accident, but yeah.
Well, we'll chalk it up to a term we use a lot here: convergent creativity.
Well,
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah.
It can't not be.
But since I will note I do feel bad for Transformers 1 as a movie, because it was completely murdered by marketing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that it was.
Since all the marketing made it look like it was going to be doing this bunch of Whedonisms, which everyone was sick of by that point.
When there was nothing of the sort in that movie.
But because of that, and this is also the reason why one of the ironclad rules that I'd have if I was assigning a writing team with this is the only telltale sign that you're speaking to the Fallen is the fact that you're dealing with a Transformer on fire. And in that same vein, I would go one step further and go with the idea that whenever there is a mini-con in the presence of whoever is possessed by the Fallen seems to recoil as if in pain, the same way someone possessed is writhing in pain at seeing the sign of the cross or something.
Yeah.
Essentially going with the notion that for whatever reason the mini-cons are not only immune but are an active counterforce to that possession.
Yeah, that could work.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, I love keeping the mini cons as this very unique aspect at whatever time that the primes planted them across the galaxy, or even if just on Earth, if we went that way. They have extensive hidden knowledge in them on top of it that can unlock all kinds of things, and the Fallen would know that. Therefore, the recoil, the sense of no, these guys are the potential to expose everything I'm trying to accomplish.
The other big reason I wanted to go with that is it's not like just anyone uses any mini-con when the opportunity comes. There's always, each Transformer throughout the series always had one designated as their partner.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that can be maintained, where that partnership is still present as a way to fend off that influence.
Oh, I see. Yeah, fend off the influence of the Fallen.
Mm-hmm.
I get it.
Once we get to Cybertron, first, that is where the whole thing is. Unicron is awake, and we need to find things that'll either deal with him or put him back to sleep.
or destroy him and create a black hole.
I'm not doing that. That was stupid. There's millions of black holes across the universe, and yet this one is going to destroy the universe. Get real. No.
Yeah. Well, the dormant aspect. I mean, it really does come back. You were just talking about the mini-cons, having a specific Autobot that they're connected to. I mean, of course, that works great for the toy line, but also, in continuity and ultimately in cosmology. From the movie on, the cosmology really ended with until all are one, meaning all things have to come back to the one thing, whatever Primus and Unicron were before they were Primus and Unicron. In that aspect, Unicron can't just blow up and become a black hole. He has to either become dormant again or has to be dealt with, because he's part of the one, and you can't get rid of part of the one, or else it all falls apart.
Yeah.
Not to mention also the significance of what Unicron represents in its entirety within the universe, which is as you said, it's the part of the one. It's the opposite of Primus.
Yeah.
So we also have to keep in mind that it's most likely going to be dormant, because everything that Unicron represents can never be really given away.
Right.
And it could, more likely it could be absorbed into another form, but at some point, something of Unicron, even if it's just his spark, will remain.
I would also make the change that, like, maybe the Fallen wouldn't know why the mini-cons revile him, why he can't be around them, because then it would also create a mystery of, well, why can't he be around him, and he doesn't know. And then it would be revealed that, it's because Unicron is behind it.
Yeah.
Because up until that point, the only thing they'd know is, for whatever reason, if a mini-con is attached to a Transformer, then the Fallen can't possess him.
Yeah.
And even if a Unicron is in the same room, the Fallen starts recoiling. And of course, he's never going to say why, because why would you give that kind of info to the enemy? But
I like the idea that he doesn't even know, really. It's just visceral for him.
And I would say that this is where we can reintroduce the planet keys, but instead of having them be a different form of power-up, having them be for as a means to actually reactivate Primus. I think that might work a little bit better than the Unicron of Light that we got in the original series, which
Oh yeah, in Armada.
Was that
maybe
So what's between the mini-cons, and there was nothing in Energon that was the equivalent of a extra thing other than the Autobots could build together, and I can't remember what they had for the Decepticons, but there wasn't an extra thing like a mini-con or
it was the Power Star or whatever it is. And for the I'm going to say on this, we had power linking or whatever it is. It was allowed two Autobots to combine together to make one new robot. It formed the arms and legs gimmicks. For Decepticons, if I remember correctly, it was like a boost mode or something.
Okay.
Because I think it was like they had Cybertron Scorponok had this space cruiser mode that wasn't part of his initial thing, but it was supposed to be his boost mode.
Yeah, like a boost mode. So nothing in addition. So if in the additional thing where you have the keys and the mini-cons, well, maybe that in the all is one thing, there's a key for each mini-con, and maybe that's the unlock for the information that they're looking for to wake up Prime.
As far as the question of, well, why weren't the keys used earlier when it comes to this? I'd say it has to do with two. I'd say it has to do with two things. One, I'm going with the notion that even within the Unicron's own heads, there is layers upon layers of security and locking that had to be unlocked, and even they weren't fully aware of how to do it. Much in the same way is like in the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Atem didn't know he was Atem for the longest time, and anyone who tried to go digging would have to deal with a lot of security, like when Shadi did it and almost got himself killed multiple times over. Because there was just that much security layering on it.
Yeah, and at whatever point that it was decided to be not the one thing anymore, and then relativity between the two had existed, then if it were to ever get that way again, you're talking about this huge confluence of power that would be too astronomical. So let's make sure that never happens. So we'll make sure that there's keys over here and there's mini cons over here and everything is all in different places, so that there's no hoarding of power in one single place.
Yeah, but
I was going to suggest maybe the secret that the minicons have is that the key to reviving Cybertron is the planet keys, and that's their explanation for why they start going into space. Instead of the keys unlocking the minicons are holding the secret of the planet keys.
Yeah, it's like a certain set or a certain team, like you need a certain amount of them to be able to unlock certain areas. Because if you look at the actual teams of minicons, like I'm looking at the main sets ones, not just loose individuals tied to a certain transformer. A lot of them, like we have sea base, we have military, etc., etc. Maybe you have certain keys that.
I think that's going a bit too into the weeds for what we do on this.
That's fair. I'm just saying, like, it's a better way to correlate them.
Yeah.
To it.
I know that there were the themed things with the keys originally, but there's no reason we have to follow that same route. I would say, however, when it comes to it would be far too easy and far too convenient if warping is at a level where it can just be easily used by anyone by the time we get to the Cybertron part of this. I think the approach that should be taken is that the space bridge, which has been established as the main means of interstellar travel, has is like a series of highways, and like a series of highways, there are a multitude of safe and less safe routes to different planets, and the routes that are being taken are ones that have been long since abandoned, or the signal is a rough estimate of a given spot. It's not all that specific. So you can still have that adventure across different planets, that chase to find these things, but you don't know the exact location.
You don't.
Because I'm going with the route that these particular routes on the space bridge haven't been used in millions of years.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you know what happens when a highway or a road is just left to nature over a few decades. So imagine just multiplying that several thousand times over. Because I will admit this is my own biases, but I've always been a fan of having it that space travel is not as easy as it could be. Even when you're dealing with FTL travel, there are still certain risks that you have to deal with, whether it be precise calculations or my particular favorite, having to map out the routes.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of things like jump points in interstellar science fiction. These specific places that always go from point A to point B, and there's no variation of it, but you have to find those points.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like a little bit less restricted version of the mass relays from Mass Effect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and obviously the mass relays have a bit more freedom, because at the end of the day, the mass relays are a giant ass railgun.
Yeah.
They are. Yeah.
I think SF Debris called it a transportation system approved by Wile E. Coyote. Which
Approved by Wile E. Coyote, made by Acme.
Hmm.
Yep.
But the point is that I remember watching some of Phil Mento's videos years ago, and there was a particular thing he brought up with plot, and I brought this up before, that there are 3 important things to a good plot: goal, stakes, urgency.
Yep.
And I think that's something I've been kind of dipping into with, looking for where the Fallen's real body is, or looking for the keys to stop Unicron.
For sure. And then there's the transformative journey of Hotshot being a part of that, wherever where it takes him from, the immature guy who's effing off and being silly to being more serious and having to do something like confront the Fallen or be infected by the Fallen, meaning the flames, and then overcomes that somehow, either with the minicons or on his own. That's part of his transformative thing. And then in the end, these keys unlocking his ability to access, Primus or some sort of matrix of leadership equivalent.
Now, as far as the Matrix, I would still keep that with Prime throughout this. But when it comes to Hotshot, the approach I'm thinking is that particular I'm really good at this, I can handle it attitude backfires on him when he ends up getting possessed, and you can do a whole mini story about him being possessed, and that hot-headedness basically being thrown back in his face.
Yeah.
And eventually breaking out of it, both through his minicon partner and his own willpower. Because I can easily see that as a dramatic moment of him fighting off the Fallen, who viewed Hotshot as the weak link, essentially. Because
sorry, guys, I'm getting called away. I'm gonna have to leave.
No worries, Rick. Thanks for coming in, and stay frosty, man.
Yeah, same here. I got to get back to editing. This has been a blast, guys.
But thank you both.
Sure.
But when it comes to the final thing with Primus, I do think the keys should reactivate him, and we've already had I think we've already had at one point Primus transforming. Cybertron transforming into Primus proper. I could have swore we've seen that at least once.
Let me check.
If not that, then there's other equivalents that could be used, like say Metroplex.
Well, now I have a bit of a question. Now that you bring up the Matrix of Leadership, what role would that play in this story?
I would say the Matrix of Leadership could be considered a kind of master key.
Yeah, I can see that.
Like a master key to Cybertron, or?
Yeah. The approach, because for whatever reason, I have this in my head that at a core part of the matrix of leadership is the remnants of the spark of the last Autobot, the last transformer that was made by Primus. It was a bit of a thing in the original Marvel comic, and it would be a nice little throwback to put in here, I think.
I think what you could do with that is that if the matrix of leadership is a key to Primus, what you could do is you could have that moment where, in order to defeat Unicron, Optimus uses the matrix of leadership to enter the core of Cybertron and transform Cybertron into Primus.
That I'd be willing to go with. And in that same vein, as much as some people may cry foul, I do think that instead of having Megatron transform into Galvatron, I would just have Galvatron be formed as one of Unicron's, for lack of a better term, primes. I'm trying not to reference
Galvatron's Revenge again, but it's not a horrible idea, just it's tainted because of Galvatron's Revenge.
Well, I haven't seen Galvatron's Revenge, so.
But I mean, it's not a horrible idea. It's just my brain is associating it with that movie.
Yeah. I don't have. But the big reason I would go with that is to draw parallels. We already mentioned the primes being the angels of Primus.
Yeah.
So why not have an equivalent?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there was an attempt to do that kind of with Unicron having his own equivalent of four horsemen. I'm just taking a different approach with it.
I mean, if we're doing like parallels, I think it would be a bit more impactful, since Galvatron has that weight to him where it's like it's supposed to be that people have that connection with Galvatron where he's supposed to be a reformatted Megatron.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be better if instead of Galvatron being Unicron's prime, it would be Nemesis Prime. So that way there's a dark parallel with an already existing prime.
I could go with that, and the other reason I would go with that is there's that hinting of Unicron influencing people through its own subconscious, and that's the reason why you would have the appearance of, say, Nemesis Prime or Galvatron or whichever we would use as Unicron's equivalent to primes.
I mean, you could technically, if we're going to do multiple primes, you could have both. Nemesis Prime and Galvatron.
Yeah. But the basically reforming his bit, seeing those two as ideal candidates, but making his own version of them in his image.
Yeah, like he would try to take Megatron or Optimus Prime, and he can't do it, so he would make his own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And because I think by the time we'd reach that tail end of that arc, there is at the very least a truce between Autobot and Decepticon, because Unicron is up and about. That is going to take far more priority than their particular fights.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
And because of that, I do think one of the ending fights should involve Hot Rod as the Knight of Primus, essentially, or if you prefer, a Paladin.
So yeah, did you mean Hot Rod or Hot Shot?
Yeah, Hot Shot. Sorry, my bad.
Oh, no problem. So we're not doing the whole Hot Shot turning into a Prime thing like Hot Rod. We're not doing that.
No, I don't see a. First off, I'd have to come up with a proper name for the new Prime. And second off, doing that, I feel is still going to be tied to the matrix of leadership, and I don't think that would fit the arc that we've developed with this version of Hotshot.
Neither do I.
I think in that regard, it's far more appropriate to have Hotshot definitely going through his arc, but the culmination is him being and thank you Echo 42 for the follow. Hope you enjoy the madness. I always end up getting a bit surprised when I hear my follow alert, because it's the Clang from Berserk. But when it comes to it, the culmination is Hotshot getting reformatted by Primus and being reunited with the Star Saber, since the Star Saber is meant to be their version of Excalibur, so why not go full speed?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I do think in the aftermath of that, both Unicron wouldn't be destroyed, but merely rendered dormant again, and moved to some distant place in the galaxy. Mostly because of the fact that if one's destroyed, then the other would go with it. Given the parallels that we've been doing up to this point.
Yeah.
So I know it would be tempting to have Hotshot be the new Prime, but again, given the arc, it doesn't fit, and given the character, I don't think he wanted yet. The big point with the arc is that no matter how skilled he is, he's still not quite ready for that level yet, and he knows it. Like he's aware that that no matter how skilled he is, he's not invincible.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean he can't contribute, but leadership is not his spot to contribute. Which is why there's that option of him being the Knight of Primus. And I know that we kind of hinted about using Starscream, and I will do a bit of a bold move. Instead of Starscream switching to the Autobots and then switching back, I would be inclined to having him throughout most of this story stay as an Autobot.
Yeah.
See why you would be.
Especially
because I don't.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say I don't remember much of the Unicron trilogy. That's why I've been kind of quiet about it this stream. But that was one of the things I do remember, is that like Starscream's values just aligned a lot better with the Autobots.
Plus, I think it would make his eventual confrontation with Megatron have far more of an impact than him going back and forth.
Yeah,
I mean,
and I think that confrontation with Megatron, that should probably happen. I think in the second act, like at the end of the second act, because in my experience in writing, that second act is just so hard to write for. Because it's just like, okay, I know how I want to start it. I know how I want to end it. But how do I get there? And what do I fill this empty space with? So I think a lot of the second act should be dedicated to Starscream preparing for that fight against Megatron.
Pretty much. And there's for whatever reason, I have this image in my head of him getting combat training from Jetfire, who definitely would have seniority when it comes to that sort of thing.
Yeah, I can see that being the case.
Especially since Jetfire is one of the few air-based transformers on that side of the equation.
Yeah.
A big now the relationship that Starscream had with Alexis, that I'd still keep that. I would not only keep that ridiculous quilt that the kids made for him, but I'd also have it that he gets very defensive whenever somebody makes fun of it. You can have that as both a running gag as well as something significantly more serious.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can. You really can.
And in the original, Starscream sacrificed himself so that Megatron could see that the whole Unicron thing wasn't a front, but an actual threat.
Yeah.
I think in this reconstruction, the confrontation Starscream has with Megatron is what forces Megatron to see the bigger picture, but in a different way. Because I could easily see him thinking, oh, he's just being brainwashed by Optimus. If I kick him hard enough, as I've kicked him before, he'll switch sides. And Starscream's attitude is, no, I'm done with you. I'm done with you.
Yeah.
And I think another thing you could do to add a little bit of credence to Starscream is have one of like Megatron's most loyal Decepticons like agree with Starscream, even though Starscream's about to lose in the fight. This loyal Decepticon would step up and say, like, Starscream's telling the truth.
Of the potential ones from that group, I would say it should be Demolishor.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Demolishor was something of, I was gonna say either Demolishor or Cyclonus.
Because like wasn't like Demolisher. He wasn't like really the brightest, but he was fiercely loyal to Megatron.
Yes. And the big thing with this is that the flaw that Megatron would have in that particular arc is he feels that because of the fact that he's been the strongest, that he is the strongest, that he is entitled to that loyalty, when that loyalty has to be earned. And you can't just earn loyalty just by having the bigger fist.
No, you can't.
Yeah, you could also make it so that he gets that mindset because of his backstory of him being a gladiator, where he won fights purely based on his brawn rather than his brains.
Yeah, and I wouldn't have Megatron be dumb muscle or something like that, but
right.
But he definitely has a might makes right attitude.
Yeah.
Which can certainly win fights, but it can't win wars. And meanwhile, one of the big things that Starscream ends up taking away from his training with Jetfire, because of this series, this particular Trinity has leaned heavily into mecha anime motifs. So why not go full speed with this sort of thing? And the big thing that Starscream ends up learning throughout it is learning to fight with his head, instead of taking the frontal approach. Especially since one of the interesting things I found with this iteration of Starscream was turning him into a bit of a swordsman. with transforming one of his wings into a energy sword and all that.
Yeah.
So why not lean into that a little bit? Essentially turn Starscream into a bit of a sword master. That particular talent being cultivated by more experienced Transformers like Jetfire.
Right.
Plus, I will admit a little bit of bias in the sense that it's giving more screen time for Scott McNeil.
Yeah.
I like Scott. I can't help it. Just don't go drinking with the guy. Speaking from some experience. But I do think that at the end of all this, what you should obviously, Optimus Prime and Megatron aren't going to be doing too much in the way of character change, but that's somewhat by design. It would be difficult to do a whole lot of character reformatting with them and giving them arcs when there's so many other characters who are being given arcs. Having them as somewhat stable figures is more important. I think that's something that's often lost when people talk about storytelling, is the idea of having one stable character and the person who actually gets the arc in a given story.
Yeah, because it's kind of this weird notion that if your character isn't dynamic, then they're not a character. You can have a static character that's interesting.
I'd use as an did you ever see the version of Dredd that Carl Urban was in?
That's the newer one.
Yep.
Yeah, I saw that one.
Yeah. Obviously trying to do a dynamic backstory with Dredd is something you can't really get away with. So the story arc instead goes to Anderson, who's usually had that kind of thing anyways in a lot of the comics. And it's all the better for it. It was just unfortunate how that movie turned out. Not due to it being bad, but due to it getting screwed over. Both through distribution and a lot of people, they still looked at it as the Stallone version, and I think around that time people were sick of the whole 3D gimmick.
Yeah, that was one of those movies where like nobody saw it in theaters, but when it came to like streaming, that's when everyone watched it and realized how good it was.
Mm-hmm. And I think, although it has been confirmed that when it came to the Stallone Dredd, Stallone didn't want to take the helmet off. That was the producer pushing that.
Was.
But getting back to what we've got here, I know some might ask why some things like the emphasis on combiners in Energon or the cyber keys in Cybertron weren't used the way they were originally. The reason for that is the idea with this is taking the Unicron trilogy, taking some of the elements in it, and making a structured trilogy that is akin to a 3-act story, just overarching over either 3 movies or 3 TV series, whichever you'd want to go with it, but just providing that outline. And
yeah.
There was a lot of, because of the fact that the 3 series as they weren't meant to be interconnected, they end up repeating a lot of stuff and redoing gimmicks. Whereas if we do a 3-act story, you don't have that problem. And I will admit I didn't focus as much on some of the characters that were introduced in Energon or Cybertron, because I like keeping casts small if I can help it.
Yeah, same here.
Because A smaller cast means I can do more with those individual characters.
Right.
I know that Transformers likes to have loads and loads of characters, but that comes at a price. And that's not to say you still can't have them, but there needs to be a few that are the focus.
Yeah, and speaking from personal experience, like it's so easy to just introduce a new character to do this thing that you need a character to do that doesn't necessarily fit one of your already established characters, but the best way to work around that is probably to like make your characters open enough or develop your characters in a way that allows them to fit that utility.
Mm-hmm.
So that you're not just creating new characters just to do this one thing and then they die.
Pretty much. And when it comes, and that's something that I'd like to avoid. But with something like this, you have a outline that can be used as you go further into the future. I know with Energon, there was this idea that Earth organizations were directly working with Transformers. I'm not the biggest fan of that to a point. Much in the same way, I'm willing to work with that with like specific organizations dedicated to it, like what Nests was supposed to be very early on in the Bay movies.
Oh yeah.
But even that is a stretch, and I'm not willing to go much further than that. Plus, there's the whole robots in disguise thing. So if they're openly working with large segments of the population on Earth, then what's the point of the disguise?
Yeah, because that just went out the window after the second movie.
Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, once we get into space, the purpose of this, I don't think the disguises should be gotten rid of, but the alt modes should just be an extension of their particular approaches in, say, combat or exploration, rather than a full-on disguise. In the same way that you have the transformations in, say, Transformers 1 or the Cybertron duology, but they don't look like Earth vehicles.
Yeah.
They still look like vehicles, just not Earth ones. So why?
It's kind of like how Drift in Age of Extinction, when he turns into his helicopter mode, it doesn't look like an Earth helicopter. It's just like a Bugatti that just got mismatched into a helicopter, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Only you do that for like a spaceship or something.
Yeah. And I'd say that about covers this particular experiment. This was an interesting one to go into because compressing 3 different series into one go is something that we haven't really done before. I know some might bring up what we did with, say, Ruby or Legend of Korra, but those were over several videos, not in one go.
Exactly.
Especially the Ruby one. That was 4 videos. But with that said, I would like to, of course, give a sincere thanks to everyone who took the time out of their schedule to come all the way to my temple and enjoy the madness that happens around here. We will be back with GeekWatch next week with something a little different, but still with that same degree of exploration. And later tonight, I will most likely be doing the demo grab bag. And as I pointed out on the schedule, there's going to be plenty of interviews I'm doing throughout the week. Because I'm trying to hit 1,000 interviews before the end of February. I just had to do it in a year that it isn't a leap year because it's me. So please look forward to all of that. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra, I am your gaming monk, and join the watch.
雨の降り 上楽が上少年関税を忘年関 上洛が上少年関税を忘年関税を年々上新規年々不利し関税を多物物用物異用物縁無暴走上洛が上少年関税を忘年関税を年々上新規年々不利し関税を多物物用物異用物縁無暴走上洛が上少年関税を忘年関税を年々上新規年々不利し関税を雨の物量物異用物縁無暴走上洛が上少年関税を忘年関税を年々上新規年々不利し関税を上 遅い上洛が上長年関税を往年関税を年々重心期年々不利し関税上洛が上昇年 雨を降りよう 年関税を5年関税を年々上新規年々売りし関税をナモ仏用通異用仏縁無法相上落が上長年関税を5年関税を年々上新規年々売りし関税をナモ仏用仏異用仏縁無法相上落が上長年関税を5年関税を年々上新規年々売りし関税をナモ仏用仏異用仏縁無法相上落が上長年関税を5年関税を年々上新規年々売りし関税を上落が上長年関税を Oh 遅い上洛が上少年関税